I first learnt about Keyhaven Yacht Club because I was mad keen on boats. I'd been playing around in boats for as soon as I was allowed to and get away from nursemaids on the lake at Newlands. And then I gravitated from that to trying to go to Keyhaven. Eventually I got down to Keyhaven on my bike from Newlands, which is about 2.5 miles, and started there. When I went down to Keyhaven in the first instance, it consisted of Adams's boatyard. There wasn't even, as far as I was concerned at the time, any club at all. And it wasn't until several years later that wandering around Adams's boatyard, I found that one complete boat shed had been converted, if you like, probably because he hadn't got any boats, with 1 foot square, 6 foot length timbers, which were being used as seats, I realised later. But by the side of these were empty bottles and glasses. And it was then that I realised that the big, about 3 or 4 of these, which had been made as seats, had been made as a sort of seats while everybody was sitting around talking. Not when I was there at the age of 12, or no, I was even laid about 10 or 11. I wasn't even a member of the club in those days. I just simply came to visit boats. Boats attracted me, and it wasn't until some considerable time later that I bought a boat I persuaded my parents to get a boat, a scow, but I wasn't allowed to have it on my own. I had to share it with my 3 sisters, and that was a Lymington scow, and I kept that at Lymington because the girls didn't want to go to Keyhaven. That's about all there is to it. We came from Lymington to Keyhaven over the marshes and eventually down by sea for about 2 years, I suppose, and eventually we came to Keyhaven. Then I met Major Learmont, who had a 18-foot sailing boat, and I got very interested in that, and he used to take me out for sails occasionally. And then eventually, when I got a bit older, I bought it from him. Then there was a question as to how I would really start sailing. So I had several lessons from Adams, or if it wasn't from Adams, it was from someone he recommended. And he then told me by that time I should be a full member, so I had to pay him, I think it was another couple of half crowns a year, and that was how I joined the Keyhaven Yacht Club. There was no clubhouse at all at that time. Well, there was a sort of general, how can I put it, a sort of general feeling that there should be a clubhouse. He had originally, when I first went down there at a tender age of about 10 or 12, he had these big square things and the boatyard shed. Then everybody said, well, it ought to be a proper clubhouse, and they eventually, and I'm not absolutely certain about the time factor here, but they eventually put on a clubhouse on the other side of the bank from where it is now, that's the east side, and it was really an appallingly stupid thing, because no one went over there. And they didn't go over there, not because they objected to the house, which had been put on sort of poles to enable the tide to come in, but if you wanted to visit the clubhouse, what you had to do was to land on the west side, then tie up your boat, dinghy or whatever, then you had to walk all the way round to the sort of fairly sharp wall at the end, round back to the boatyard, and that was the clubhouse, by which time you were completely exhausted. You didn't want to do it because it was taking so much time, and when you got to the clubhouse you'd have to climb up the steps to get into the house, although you had a key, and of course it only was one small key. It was rather like a bathing hut on poles, and so there was never anybody there, so no one ever visited it. I think I only went in there about twice to see what had anybody put there. When I was small and was going around with Major Adams, Major Learmont, there were no really other members that I was aware of. I realised they must have been, but I never met anybody, and they were quite happy to have a club, but where they actually met, certainly it wasn't in Adams's boatyard. I'm not sure they did. And it wasn't until considerably later that they put this pole boathouse or yacht club, and then as soon as they got the money, they built it over on the other side. Well, the Hurst Castle Sailing Club, as far as I understand, and this of course is only hearsay, came about from Major Bellairs, who was a man who had put himself up for the Keyhaven Yacht Club. Well, he never joined the Keyhaven Yacht Club. He joined the he was unable to join the Keyhaven Yacht Club, and so he started the Hurst Castle Sailing Club. For a long time the two were quite happy acting together, and though there was a certain amount of friction which came about in 1930 when I was on the local council. I can remember the clerk saying, I had a letter from the Keyhaven Yacht Club or from the Hurst Castle Sailing Club, and a groan used to go down the committee because it was a sort of regular thing that the Keyhaven Yacht Club were quarrelling with the Hurst Castle Sailing Club, and it didn't matter what it was going to be a headache for us. I have done very little racing. I've done some of the cross-channel ones at a later date, and I can remember Colin Moody and myself in one wonderful yacht race that was after the war, and we had such a light wind that I took the sheets of the jib off the ropes off and tied it with string. But I think we came second or something, but it was interesting. The only character I do remember some of the boatyard people, when I changed the name very stupidly in my boat to Mystic. Unfortunately, this was the converted ship's lifeboat, very, very well committed. In fact, everybody used to say what a wonderful conversion it was. But it was called New Orleans. Now, I couldn't have a boat called that, I really couldn't, and I changed it to Mystic. Whereupon, in its time with me, it sank 3 times and caught fire once. And I can remember saying to Adams, what on earth am I going to do with this boat? I can't put it in the water without it going wrong. And he said, well, he said, I think if you were going to do that, you want to launch it backwards. So we had the damn thing pulled up, turned round and launched backwards. I sold it almost immediately afterwards. Someone came along and bought it, so perhaps that was a good luck after all, I don't know.